Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Richard Wilmore.
Everyone, sit, relax. Welcome to Make Your Day Richer. I am Richard Wilmore, and I'm excited for you to meet Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. He's the CEO of a nonprofit out in Long Island called Family and Children's Association. He also has a great, amazing book that everyone should be reading called Every Mile Matters, turning triathlon training into cancer triumph. And I'm just excited for you to meet him. I'm excited to meet him. So I think we should start the show, okay? Hit it, begin.
Make your day richer than it was before. Got some good times knocking upon your front door.
Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Of course. You have had quite the life, and it has all kind of come now to lots of things that I want to talk to you about, the nonprofit and your book. Let's go with the book, Every Mile Matters. How long has that been out?
So it's been out about a month and a half. It took me about a year and a half to write it. I actually started writing it during chemotherapy. And as you know, the book is about my cancer journey, but more importantly, how my triathlon training shaped my approach to cancer and, quite frankly, how it shapes my approach to life. You know, the long story short is it's November 2021. I have just completed Ironman Florida, which for your audience is a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike ride, followed by a full 26.2 mile marathon. You must do it in under 17 hours, otherwise you are disqualified. I did it in just over 15. At the height of my fitness, feeling great, go in for a routine exam, and am diagnosed a few months later with prostate cancer. Just out of the blue diagnosis. I go through treatment in July of that following year. Everything goes great. I'm back to racing. I ran the New York City Marathon that November. By now, I've really become an evangelist for routine screening. So I go in like every 45-year-old plus person should do and get a colonoscopy. Wake up only to be told that I have stage 3B colorectal cancer. So 2 cancers in 2 years, one more serious than the next. And look, through it all, hearing the words "you have cancer" is a game changer. I think about life now before that first diagnosis and now. It's before and after. It does divide up your life a little bit. But one of the things that I thought about soon after my first diagnosis is I could do this. I just did Ironman Florida with cancer, by the way. And you never want to confuse health and fitness because they're two really, really different things. But one of the themes of the book is doing hard things trains you for hard things. And so, you know, I was told that there's no evidence of disease. My treatment for both cancers was successful. That's absolutely a miracle. And they don't use the term remission anymore. It's no evidence of disease. And, you know, cancer leaves plenty of evidence behind. And so does the treatment. And so, you know, I still have some side effects and that kind of thing. It hasn't really slowed me down at all. But the other side effects of going through this, really immense gratitude, a new appreciation for things in life. A cancer diagnosis forces you to look at a lot of things. As I wrote in the book, it changes your relationship with other people. It changes your relationship with yourself. It changes your relationship with a higher power, however you define that in your world. It really changes life in a pretty big way. You know, there are folks out there that say, well, cancer is a gift. It's no gift. Trust me, it is not a gift. But if you approach it and you know, cancer, any other life-changing diagnosis, any other life-changing thing that happens, a divorce, job loss, that kind of thing, you know, I think it helps to hearken back on the hard days that you've made it through and to really get back to who you are.
What made you want to write the book and in some ways relive all of that and put yourself out there like that?
It was tough, but, you know, in some regards, I felt like I had a responsibility. So I've worked in the not-for-profit sector for, I don't know, 30 or 35 years. And, this marked a dramatic change. I'm the guy who solves people's problems. So when your marriage implodes at 2 a.m., you call me. When your teenager overdoses at 4 a.m., you call me. I'm the guy with all the answers, the one that kind of does the hand holding. And I've walked beside thousands of families as they've navigated everything from domestic violence and sex crimes to HIV to, the opioid crisis and beyond. And I felt like those families entrusted me with their life and their secrets. And for me to keep this all wrapped up in secretive felt almost like a betrayal. So it's a story about the importance of early detection. In neither case did I have any symptoms whatsoever. I walked into the doctor's office feeling like this is a formality. I'm just doing this because it's the right thing to do. But I also wanted to help chart a course for people who might hear those words, you have cancer. I wanted to kind of share the introspection. I just felt like I owed it. I owed it to the people I'd served in the past who had been so open about their problems and struggles. And I also saw how opening up about those things just helps halve the pain, right? Sharing it with somebody else can help halve the pain. It did for me. There were chapters, obviously, that were harder and those that were more challenging to write. I did the beginning. I did the end. Those were the easy parts. One of the chapters I struggled incredibly with was the piece about spirituality and kind of wrestling with, what happens after this life? What comes next? What does legacy look like? Every funeral I went to hit a little bit differently and almost became a dress rehearsal for what, could have been my own in very short order. And so it took a long time to actually work those things through in order to be able to write about them in a way that wasn't a complete and utter mess. And so the book was therapeutic. So from a selfish standpoint, it enabled me to work some things through, to clarify some things. And outside of that, it's really just kind of sharing some of the messages, some of the hope with the world. I didn't sit down and die. I got up, I exercised through chemotherapy, which made a huge difference. So many people out there are navigating treatment of some kind right now. And there are some tips and tricks that you can use to make it a little bit better and make it a little bit easier.
Who would you say that the book is for? Is it for also, I would say, caregivers, right? The people that are coming alongside someone on this path.
Yeah, it's an incredible journey. And, I thought about kind of, being diagnosed, and I would much rather have been the one diagnosed than say my children or my wife, and that, because you have more efficacy as kind of the person walking alongside. You're somewhat limited in kind of what you can do and what you feel and that kind of thing. And so I did include some advice for caregivers in there in terms of how to manage this and how to manage the craziness that goes along with a diagnosis and the treatment. I included some pieces about what not to say to cancer survivors or somebody when they tell you they're diagnosed. Here's the Cliff's Notes version. Any sentence that begins with "at least" is a non-starter. Don't say it. So I had people say to me, at least you didn't lose your hair. Like, that's the last thing I'm concerned about. But many people are very concerned about it. At least you don't have a more serious cancer. My uncle had this is what he did. And so none of that stuff is very helpful. And what I always said to people is, if you're not sure what to say, which is actually pretty normal, right? You want to say exactly the right thing. So you kind of say nothing, or you fumble over your words. It's okay to say, I really don't know what to say, but I'm sorry this is happening to you.
Yeah.
And so lots of advice for caregivers. Back to your question as to who it's for. Yes, it's for caregivers. But quite frankly, I intend this as being kind of a guide for just living life. And there's some really basic messages in there, and they're basic, right? Be grateful for what you have. Don't frame things that I have to do this, rather I get to do this. Some of that stuff feels like pop psych kind of things, but they were important reminders to me as I was going through this. When I couldn't exercise for, probably a good 6-8 months to the extent that I wanted to, I'd look out the window and see people running by my house. And I was so jealous. I'm like, I used to remember when I did that. Lo and behold, I ran 10.5 miles yesterday with no problem whatsoever. I did 50 miles on the bike on Saturday. And so now I'm back to doing it. And so there's never a time where I'm like, oh, my training plan calls for 50 miles on a bike. It's like, no, I get to. There's people sitting in chemo infusion rooms right now that would kill for the opportunity to get on a bike and go out and ride in the fresh air. And so some of it feels trite, like things that, we've heard a million times before, but they're important reminders.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you hearing from people that have read the book?
The response has been amazing. I've done a couple of news segments and that kind of thing, so the word is out there pretty broadly. One of the things that has stunned me is the number of people who have just looked me up, emailed me, and said, can I just ask you a quick question? My partner, my son, my daughter, my cousin was just diagnosed, or, what were the signs you saw before you were diagnosed? And the truth is nothing. Somebody actually wrote to me in the past week and said, I'm supposed to have a colonoscopy. I'm about 6 months too late. It's so yucky. It's uncomfortable. It's miserable. Yeah. Well, I've been to almost 100 medical appointments over the course of 9 months when I was in the heat of this. And if you want to talk about inconvenient, yucky, and uncomfortable, wind up with cancer that needs to be treated. And so we know the value of prevention. So it's nice having people kind of reach out, even if they're complete strangers, and say, can you just answer this quick question for me?
When I was reading all the notes about you and reading about the book and reading the book, one thing that struck with me was the use of vulnerability and the words I love you around, especially around stuff with this. A lot of times you don't say it until someone's very sick, and then all of a sudden you're bombarding them with all of that.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, around males and male to male, like friendships, sons. Can you talk a little bit about that, and if that changed you and what your relationship was revolving around love?
Yeah, so I was struck by the number of male friends I've had for a long time, who would say, I love you to me. At the end, we'd have lunch together or something. And it wasn't like you go out for a few drinks and you give a bro hug and you're like, I love you, man, kind of thing, in a drunken stupor. It was like heartfelt kind of stuff, and like heart emojis in texts. And I'm like, what is happening? Right. And part of it was like, am I sicker than I think? Like, do they think I'm going to die? Like, they're telling me they think this is our last conversation, kind of thing. And so it took me a while to adjust to it and to adapt to it. I will say, sharing kind of your fear about death, sharing your fear about life, sharing the notion that maybe I didn't accomplish everything that I wanted to accomplish, or maybe there's things I could have done differently, brings you closer to people. And so it deepened a lot of my friendships. In fact, I have a good friend who called me a couple days ago and said, I made it through the book. I loved it. It was fantastic. And I'm going to take a lesson from the book and tell you, I love you. And even then, it still kind of struck me as a little odd. We both chuckled uncomfortably a little bit and that kind of thing. But, there really is this issue with men kind of being that deep with each other and that vulnerable with each other. And I think back and I'm like, geez, I've said I love you to thousands of women. And I didn't think twice about taking that kind of risk, even when it wasn't real. So what is this thing? And I consider myself someone who's pretty enlightened, maybe even woke, that kind of thing. But it still was an adjustment. And like I said, the adjustment at first was, do they think I'm checking out? They keep telling me I look good. I'm not dying. And then beyond that, it's like, all right, so the relationship has now moved to a different level. And that's one of the things I appreciated most. There are some cancer survivors who talk about some of their relationships fell apart because the people on the other side didn't know exactly what to say, or they were freaked out. I didn't have any of that. I didn't have a single person that pulled back. And, I look across my relationship with both men and women. And it grew a lot closer. Like I said, I've historically been the guy who helps everyone. I got it under control, no worries. And P.S., by the way, I do Ironmans, and so you don't need to worry about me. And suddenly it was like, all right, you're like, I'm a little worried. Maybe you should be too. And I could just use 10 minutes to talk to you.
What was that like, that you bring that up, that you've helped so many people and you were the person that everybody went to in times of crisis? What's it like then to be going through it yourself? And did you have someone right away that you could go to, or did you have to seek that out?
I hated it. I hated every minute of it.
I
Uh,
bet.
you know, I'm, I'm all for vulnerability as long as it's someone else's.
Right.
And so, no, I hated it. I went to naturally, my circle of friends, my wife. I waited a while before I told my kids until kind of things were planned out. I made sure that I had doctors who I was comfortable with and really built a support team. The same way I would an Ironman triathlon, right? There's volunteers that come and set up the course and that kind of thing. In one of my first oncology appointments, my oncologist said, are you stressed? I'm like, yes, I'm stressed. I might die. And he's like, all right, here's some meditation videos and you could visualize the tumor. I'm like, hold up, you have the wrong guy. Like, I am not interested in that. I want the most powerful chemo and radiation known to mankind. Then I'll worry about meditating on the tumor. And so, I was very clear on what I wanted and made sure that I had providers around me that would both respect my wishes, but also challenge me a little bit. In writing the book, I had an editor who said to me, so this is good, and you actually put a lot out there, but there are times when you start getting to that emotional place and then you pull back into a more academic place and you start including citations and everything else like that, as if you're writing an academic paper. He's like, just play in the vulnerability a little bit more and kind of stretch those pieces out. So even in doing it, I had to practice that ability to be a little bit more vulnerable.
What do you love most about your life right now?
Everything. Look, I feel like I got a second and third chance. I feel like, not everybody gets this wake up call, and sometimes people pass away without warning. I've gotten a couple of warning shots. And so that says to me, time to resolve the age old questions, to do things right that maybe you're not doing. I love helping other people. I do work with men who are newly diagnosed with prostate cancer to talk about what that means to your masculinity, to your body, and that kind of thing. So I continue to help other people. I probably am a little bit more selfish now about making sure that my needs are met and taken care of so that I can be even better at the things I do outside. And quite frankly, it's kind of a rough story, but I'm thankful that I'm in a place where I can share the story. I have friends who are like, I had cancer too, but if I tell anybody and write about it, I'm not going to be able to get a job. I'm not going to be able to get insurance. These things have ramifications.
Yeah.
I don't have any of those worries, and I can share the story as freely as I want to. And quite frankly, even in this conversation, every time I do, it reinforces my belief set. It strengthens me. It helps me ferret out some of those weaker spots, and I come out of every discussion just a little bit stronger.
What is the best way that people can connect with you out there in the world?
Sure. There's a couple ways. I'm all over social media. Usually Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds is the handle, although it varies. I have a website for the book. It's everymilematters.com. And then I have a personal website. It's jeffreyreynolds.com. So if you go to any search engine and throw me in, and you'll be able to track me down. And look, if you're struggling with something, particularly a new diagnosis, I'm ready, willing, and able to help. No strings attached.
I love that. Before we get out of here today, will you play a game with me?
Absolutely.
All right. And first, okay. And if you win, the entire non-existent studio audience gets a copy of your book. So no pressure.
Very cool.
But lots of people are counting on you. All right. Here we go. The name of the game is called Finish Line Facts. Okay?
Okay.
I'm going to have some true or false trivia questions for you that revolve around endurance sports and health.
Yep.
And you just have to tell me if it's true or false.
Yes.
All right? You get 3 out of 6. Everybody gets a copy of Every Mile Matters.
Cool.
Right here in the studio audience, not you watching at home. All right, true or false? The average Ironman triathlon takes longer to complete than the average chemotherapy session.
True.
That is true, yes. Number 2, running a marathon burns more calories than swimming 2 miles.
True.
That is false. Well, I mean, it depends on your pace and your body and all of that, but generally false. Okay, you still have one right. True or false? Mental toughness is considered one of the top predictors of endurance sport success.
I would say true.
That is true. Very good. One more. The human body produces more dopamine during a triathlon than during a Netflix binge.
I would say true.
That is true. You got it. 3 out of 6. Correct. Everyone in the non-existent studio audience gets a copy of Every Mile Matters. And Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds has signed each one individually for you. So I appreciate that so much.
My pleasure.
And thank you for not only coming on this show and talking about it, but building that community and doing so much great work out in the world. I really do appreciate everything you've done.
Likewise, and I appreciate you getting the word out. You made this informative. You helped me clarify some things for myself, and you made it fun. So I hope your audience appreciated it as much as I did.
Well, they'll let us know, but I'm sure the answer is yes. So come back anytime, please.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. We'll take a break and be right back, so don't go away. Life is difficult. Are you feeling overwhelmed or like you could use a little support for your mental well-being? Visit the Help Hub. It's the most comprehensive and inclusive free online destination for mental health resources, helpful tools, crisis hotlines, and supportive content. Just go to thehelphub.co to find the resources you need when you need them most. Unlike other resource pages, the Help Hub is divided into 16 different categories, ensuring that everyone in every community has access to the resources and support that matches their unique needs. Find the help you're looking for at thehelphub.co. We're back. Come back tomorrow for another doctor. Another doctor's in the house. Dr. Rod Berger is here. He has a book, The Narrative Edge, Authentic Storytelling that meets the moment. And we're going to talk about storytelling and why that is so important. And we're going to play a game, of course, because I love games. So I can't wait for you to meet him. Come back tomorrow. Go make your day richer. Go make somebody else's day richer. You've made mine by watching this show, and I love you for it. We'll see you tomorrow, everyone. Bye-bye.